Hello everyone, welcome to the fourth tutorial session of problem solving through programming in C. So there is a SWAYAM course which has been floated by Professor Anupam Basu from Department of CSC IIT Kharagpur, and I'm Siddhant. I'm one of the two TAs who are in charge of taking these tutorial sessions, where we'll be looking at a few questions and concepts from the lectures of this particular week, which is week 4, and we'll be solving a few questions so that it will make it easier for you to solve the assignment as well as for the final exam as well. So in this week we had a look at the if-else statements again, and we were introduced to the switch case statements and the looping statements in C. So we'll be looking at these topics starting with the if-else statements. Okay. So if-else statement was covered in the previous session. So I have just a few more questions regarding the if-else statement to be seen. So if you have any doubt at any point, you can just unmute and ask, or you can write it in the chat as well. Alright, so let's start with the first question. So here we have x equals 1. We have variable x which is set to 1, and the first if statement, it says that if x equals 0, and then we are having another if statement inside it which says if x greater than equal to 0, then it will print something, else it will print something else. So what do you think should be the output in this case? No output. Why do you think that is so? Okay, so let's see. So here I think the output will be x equals 0. Why? Because this entire part, so you see this is the first if statement, and you are not giving any braces. That means whatever statements come up, you can only write one block of statement there. So, and then this if else statement block, so this is a single block of statements. Okay, this is one compound statement, you could say, or a single block of statements. So if
Sir, I have a doubt regarding loops.
yeah, we'll discuss loops when I cover them in the class. We can discuss your doubt then. So for now I'm just covering the if else statement. Okay, so
Sir, when it will be covered?
so towards yeah, maybe in an hour or so. First I'll go through the if else statement, then switch, and then loops.
Yes, sir, thank you.
Okay. So basically this is one compound statement or a single block of statement. So this is actually going to be a nested if with the if x equals 0. So even though I have not put braces here, this entire block of statement is one if else block, and that comprises of one single compound statement. So it will go under it will become a nested if statement along with this outer if statement, which is which is checking whether x equals 0. Now having said that, if x equals 0, okay, if x equals 0, then what is sorry, if x equals 0, then this is false, right? Like x is not x is not 0, x is 1, so this condition is false. That means this entire block of statements will not be processed at all. Like it will not go through this block of statements. This if else block that you are seeing, this is within the first if statement, and because the first if statement is false, this will not even check the second, like the if else statement within it. So here you'll have no output. So you are correct that you will have no output here. So is that clear to everyone? Any doubts here? Alright, so let's see the next question then. So the next question basically just compares two characters and prints some value based on that. So what do you think should be the what will be printed if this code is executed? Okay, so you're correct. So what happens here is that every character, so both of these are char values, right? So every character has something called a ASCII code. Okay, so a corresponding integer value. So the integer value for capital A is 65, and the ASCII code value for small a is 98. Okay, so now when you compare capital A, you want to check if capital A is less than small a. Internally what it does is it compares the ASCII code value for both. So it checks is 65 less than 98, and
Sir, I have a doubt.
yes.
If it is a character function, then why int main function is used?
No, but this is a character. Sorry, I didn't get your question. It's a character function.
Yes, sir, character function. Then why didn't you write char in the program, in writing a program?
So it's not a character function. It's still an int main. Like it's still a main function. Main function we have defined as int. So we are here in the if statement, we are just comparing characters. That does not mean that it's a character function. So we are just comparing characters in the if statement. So, and based on that we are printing something. So that does not mean that it's a character function. Do you like does that clear your doubt?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay, so so when we do comparisons like this, when we try to compare characters in a if statement, so it automatically compares their ASCII code value. So ASCII code value of this capital A and small a are 65 and 98 respectively. Now it will compare both of them, and in this case this condition turns out to be true. So if it is true, then it will go and print the if part of the statement, right? So if part of the statement is just printing nptel. So here the nptel will be printed. So is that clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so now let's look at some more questions. So yeah, so we have two variables a and b with the values 0 and 10 respectively. Now we write if a equals 0, then we print something, else we print something else. So what do you think should be the output of this particular code? Right, can you explain why? So yes, it will be false. So note that I have written only single equals symbol. So usually what you would write is if a equals 0. So this means I am comparing a and 0. So in that case this would have been true, right? Because a is actually 0. So this would have been true in that case. But here what I do is I write if a equals 0. So that means I am setting I'm copying this value of 0 to a, and then this entire if statement basically reduces to if of 0. So if of 0 means it's false, right? Because in the if you remember the uh, previous session, I told you that any value other than 0 will be considered as true, and a value of 0 will be considered as false. So here if of 0, the overall expression reduces to if of 0, and that means it's false. And
Sir, can
yes,
we put 0 as an answer?
no, you cannot put 0 as an answer, because the output here will be the print statement, whatever has been printed, that will be the output of the program. Okay.
Sir, below the int main, int a is equals to 0 or a double is equals to 0?
Now that is single equals, like that we are setting the we are initializing the variable to 0, so that is only one equals symbol there.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Why here a is equal to 0 and why in the statement a double equal to 0?
So the thing, this both are single equals here. So that is what I was trying to point out, that if I had written double equals, and that means I was comparing the value of a and 0, that would have been true. Okay, because a is actually equal to 0, you have initialized the value of a to 0, but in this case, in the question, it writes only a single equal to symbol. That means it is again reinitializing a to 0, and the overall if expression turns out to be 0, right? Because a is 0, so it turns out to be 0. That means the expression itself is false. So because it is false, it will print the else part of the like the else, whatever is in the else block, and in the else block you are printing false. So here you will have false being printed. Is this clear? So the question, it writes only a single equal to, okay, it's not double equal. If it had been double equal to, then that would be our relational operator, which would be like comparing a to the value of 0. But here, yes, here it is an assignment operator. Okay. Alright, so if that is clear, then we can move on to the next question. So we have three variables here, integer variables. We have x, we have y and z, and y and z are set to the value of 5. Each of them is set to the value of 5, and then we write an expression where we write x equals y double equals z. So it's, the expression is basically like this. Okay. Now then we are printing the value of x. So what should be the output of this particular code?
Sir, answer is B1.
Right. So answer will be 1. Why? Because, so what you are doing here is you are doing a comparison between the value of y and the value of z, and both the values are 5. Now this means the condition is like this, the result of this comparison is true. Now int, so x is an int, that is an integer variable, right? So, and in the previous session, if you remember, I told you that if true has to be converted to integer, then it will give a value of 1. If false has to be converted to integer, it will give a value of 0. Okay, but the other way around, 0 will be considered as false, and anything else will be considered as true. Okay, so this is how it goes. So when it is a boolean value and it is being converted to integer, so the true will become 1 and false will become 0, and here the condition is true, y is equal to z. So now, because both of them have this value of 5, now this conditional being true, it will store a value of 1 in the integer variable x. Now when you print that, you will get 1 as the output. Clear so far? Alright. So if you have any questions at any point, you can also write them in the chat. Okay, so now let us look at another question. So you have so the question asks what will the value of I be after the execution of the following statements. So initially it has asked us to assume these values, that I equals 8, j equals 5 and k equals 0, and then we are writing a statement using ternary operators, two statements using ternary operators, and then we have to calculate what will be the value. So can anyone do this? Just try to simplify this expression, write it in a form of if else, nested if else, because you can see there are two conditions here, so it is a nested if statement. So just try to write it in a conditional form and then try to compute it. So do you understand why I wrote it like this? So does the first statement is this the same as the first statement? Whatever, if the nested if statement, if else statement that I have written, is it the same as the first statement here? So you have the first conditional, which is j greater than 5. So the first if condition is j greater than 5. Now inside that there is another, so this part is the nested if, that is the interior part. So next conditional is I less than 5, so we have another if I less than 5. So if both of these conditions are true, then you will have k with the value of I minus j, right? Now if this I less than 5 is false inside this interior, so you're still in the if in the outer j greater than 5 condition, and inside this if I is not less than 5, then it will go to the else part, which is k will be j minus I. So that is written here, right? Now if at all j is not greater than 5, then it won't do any of this. It will go simply to the else part, which says that k equals k minus j. Okay, is it clear how this happens? So what will be so just check. So j is actually equal to 5 here. So the first condition is not satisfied because j is not greater than 5, it is equal to 5. So it will not take this first so this will be false because j is equal to 5, not greater than 5. So in that case, this entire first like if else block will be ignored. It will just simply go to the else part of the statement, which says that k equals k minus j. So what will happen? K has the value of 0 and minus j is 5. So k becomes minus 5 in this first statement. Okay. Now the second statement, what it says is I minus equals then a ternary operation. So what this ternary operation is, so we are writing if of k. Just write it in a similar form as we wrote the first one. Then if of I, okay, so I minus equals j, right, and else I minus equals I. So this is the entire if block. Then else I minus equals k. Okay, is this exactly the same procedure that we did for the first statement? We'll just follow the same procedure in the second statement. Now here the only difference is it is I minus equals that you need to take care while writing the expressions. So what is the condition here? So k is minus 5. So I told you in the previous slide that any number apart from 0 will be considered as true, right? So if of k will be true, this will be true. If of minus 5 will be true. Now it comes and it has to check if of I. So I is 8, right? So far I is 8. So that is also true because it is other than 0, so it's true. So what will happen is we'll execute this statement, which is I minus equals j. So what happens? I minus equals j basically means I equals I minus j, which basically is 8 minus j is 5. So I becomes 3. Okay. So finally, after the execution of these two statements, you will get an answer of 3. Because the question asks what is the value of I, right? So the I has the value of 3 after the execution of these two statements. Is it clear how this came out to be? So whenever you encounter ternary statements, nested ternary, convert it, write a equivalent if-else statement and solve it. That is the easiest way to solve these ternary expressions. So any questions?
Sir, I have
Yeah, one by one, please.
Sir, here in the first statement, k value become minus 5, sir, right?
Yes.
So, here for the second statement, while we are checking if of k, means the value is if of minus 5.
Yes.
It means the negative value considered as true or false.
It's considered as true. So in the previous slide, if you just see, so 0 will be considered as false and anything else will be considered true, no matter positive, negative.
0 is okay.
Yes, only 0 is false. Yes.
Okay, sir, that's
Right.
Thank you.
Yeah. So anything else? Any other doubt?
Sir, can you repeat that question, sir?
This question? Okay, so basically you can see how I have written the ternary operations in form of a nested if statement. So you can see that the first conditional here, if you see the first statement, so it is k equals some nested ternary operation, right? So the first conditional is j greater than 5. So I have written if j greater than 5. Now inside this ternary operation we have an inner if statement again. The second conditional comes as I less than 5. So our conditional here is if I less than 5. So this is a nested if now. So if j is greater than 5 and I is less than 5, what is the condition? If both of them are true, then what happens? K will have the value of I minus j. So that is what I have written. Now if j is greater than 5 but I is not less than 5, what will happen? This second value will be taken, that is k equals j minus I. Okay. Now this is the if else block which is within the conditional if j greater than 5. Now we come out of this, what if j is not greater than 5? Okay, then what happens? So we have a else block for that, and that says that k will be equal to k minus j. So in this case what happens, you check the value, j has the initial value of j is 5, that has been told in the question. So if j equal to 5, then j greater than 5 is false, right? And if it is false, this entire if else statement which is within it will not execute, it will simply go to the else block. Now in the else block it is said that k equals k minus j. So that means k equals 0 because k was 0 earlier, minus j was 5, so k became minus 5. Now similarly the second statement I can write in the nested if else format, which is if of k, the first conditional is if of k and the second conditional is if of I, Now what happens if both of them are true? I minus equals, so note the minus equals here, so I minus equals j. Now if of I is not true, that is it's false, but if of k is true. So if of k is true, so this is the inner conditional, right? This part is the inner conditional statement here. So in that case, what will happen? I minus equals I. Now if at all this if of k is false, then what happens? I minus equals k. So if you put the values that was there, so k was minus 5, so you put if of minus 5, which is true, then it goes into this conditional. So it encounters a second conditional, which is if of I, and I is still, it is 8. So if of 8, which is also true, then it will go and it will execute this statement, which is I minus equals j. And I minus equals j basically means I equals I minus j, which is 8 minus 5, which is 3. So this is how this execution will proceed, and you will get a value of 3 after both the statements have been executed. I will the variable I will have a value of 3. Is that clear now?
Yeah, sir.
Okay. Alright, then we can look at the next question here. So here you have postfix and prefix operations getting performed within the if-else statements. So let us see what happens. So we have a integer variable a, which is initialized to 1, and we use a if statement which has a conditional which is a minus minus, right? And it prints something. And then we have a separate if statement which is plus plus a, and if that is true, then it will print something. So what do you think should be the answer here, the output of this code? False. Okay. So let's see. So a was 1 initially. Now if of a minus minus, what does that do? As you know, it is a postfix operation. So because it's a postfix operation, the conditional that will be checked will be if of a, and then the a value will be decreased by 1. Okay, so if of a means if of 1, right? If of 1, and now if of 1 means it is true. This is true. If of 1 means it's true. Now this conditional turned out to be true, so you will have true being printed. Okay, and then the value of a will decrease by 1, and it will become 0, right? Because a was 1 earlier, so it will become 0. Now in the second if statement, what happens? You write plus plus a. That means it's a prefix operation. That means what happens is a's value is incremented first, and then you have if of a being done. So a value will be incremented first. That means a will become 1 again. It had become 0, and it will become 1 now. And then you check if of a, which is again true, because a is 1, it will be true. So now this conditional is also true, so it will print whatever is within this under this conditional, which is the statement false. So true and false both will be printed in this case. Is it clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so this question highlights basically how the postfix and the prefix operations work. So our first conditional is if a minus minus. So this is a postfix operation. Okay, so postfix operation, what happens is first you will get whatever other operation will happen, and then the increment or decrement will happen. So here it's a decrement operation, minus minus. So here in the postfix fashion, what will happen is first it will evaluate this condition with the current value of a, and then it will decrement after it has evaluated this condition. It will decrement the value of a by 1. So with the current value of a was 1 and it evaluated the condition based on that, so the condition turned out to be true. Now if that is true, then this first print statement will be printed, which is basically writing true, right? And after that, this minus minus part will kick in, which will decrement the value of a by 1 and it will make it 0. So a will become 0 after printing this true. Okay. Now what happens next is if plus plus a, the second conditional is if plus plus a. Now this is a prefix increment operation. So what that means is first the increment will take place and then the other operations will take place. So now what we do is we increment the value of a by 1 and a had become 0, so it will become 1 now, and then we evaluate this conditional as if of a, which is if of 1, right? Now if of 1 means the conditional is true, so it will also print whatever is within this conditional block. So it will print false as well. So both true and false will be printed. True from the first conditional and false from the second conditional. Is that clear for you?
Yes, sir, clear. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so let's go to the next question. Alright, so this is more of a conceptual question. So you see, we have said there are two conditions, condition 1 and condition 2. Now you are saying that what will be, the question asks, which will be the order of evaluation of these conditions and when will this SWAYAM be printed. Okay, so just see which of the statements sounds to be correct to you. Like how will the evaluation occur, evaluation of the conditions occur. So if you remember, the logical AND operator has a associativity going from left to right, but yeah, so
Option A. Option A, sir.
okay,
Sir, it's option C.
Option C.
C, sir.
right. So option C is the correct answer here. So what will happen is first it will check the condition 1. If condition 1 is true, that is like if you remember the AND table, so what does it have? So you have A, B and you are doing A and B. So so if you remember anything, unless both of them are 1, you will get 0 as the output, right? That is, both of them are true. Unless both of them are true, you will not get a true output from AND. So this is maybe I should have written double ampersand. Okay, so so here what happens, how C takes this is first the condition 1 will be evaluated. Now if that is true, only then it makes sense to evaluate the second condition, because if the first condition itself is false, like this case, if the first condition itself is false, then there is no sense to check the second condition itself. So it will simply say that it's false. Okay, if the first condition itself is false, it will not even evaluate the second condition. Okay, so that will, the answer is option C, which says that condition 1 will be evaluated first and condition 2 will be evaluated only if condition 1 is true. Is it clear how the evaluation order
Yes.
of the conditions is? Right. Okay, so now let's see an example of this, the evaluation order. So here you have two integer variables. You have I and j with the values of 0 and 1, and then you are printing this, which is I plus plus logical and plus plus j, and then you are printing I and j. So what do you think should be the answer here? Okay, think about it properly. What I had said, what I told you earlier. Like, keep the previous question in mind while answering this. So condition 2 will be evaluated only if condition 1 is true.
Sir, it's option A, sir.
Option A.
Option B.
So basically, what is this condition? Like, if I write the condition here, so it will be 0 and something plus plus j, right? So this part is false, that we know. Now if this part is false, then the second part won't even be executed, right? Now if the second part won't even be executed, then how will the j value be incremented? So the I value will be incremented after this condition evaluation is done. So after this is done, this condition 1 turns is evaluated to be false, so it will not even evaluate condition 2, and it will be 0 for the first one. Okay, so you will have 0 being printed in the first printf, because this turned out to be, the first condition itself turns out to be false, so the second condition is not evaluated. Now after that is done, it will do an increment of I plus plus, which is I equals I plus 1, that will, I will become 1, and then, but j is not incremented here, right? J is still 1 because the second condition was not even evaluated. So you will have, when you print I and j, so I has already been incremented, but j has not been incremented. So you will have option D. So this is what I wanted to highlight here. So there is, now you might be thinking that postfix and prefix operations, I told earlier that in the operators part in the previous session, the prefix and the postfix operators have higher precedence than the logical AND operation, right? And they do have higher precedence. The postfix has higher precedence, then you have prefix, then logical AND is much down below. Okay, but these are the points where C and C++ become a bit ambiguous about things. So there are certain like, it's, I have kept it for advanced reading for you guys, so you can see I have written here more reading. So if you want to know more about it, you can go to this link. I will share this PDF with you, so you can go to this link and learn why this logical AND is a special kind of operator. So logical AND, logical OR, comma, so all of this cause something called sequence points. Okay, now that is why there is a bit of ambiguity in the order of evaluation here. So when you have expressions like this, so you have to see that the first conditional, like it will follow the overall rule of the logical and that will have like a dominance over the second, if whatever postfix prefix operation occurs in the second conditional. Okay, so things get a bit murky here, it becomes a bit ambiguous. So the developers are slowly rooting out all these ambiguities, with more recent in the recent versions of C and C++, but this kind of ambiguities are still kind of present in the C system, which is which you need to keep in mind for the time being. So here you just need to know that the first conditional, if it is evaluated to be false, the second conditional won't be evaluated no matter what the precedence rules say. Okay, so here what happens is I plus plus, so postfix operation, I had the value of 0, right? Now so this will be 0, so that means it's false. Now if this is the first conditional is false, the second conditional won't be evaluated, and then you have i's value incremented by 1. So I value will become 1, but the second condition is not evaluated, so j value will still remain at 1, and you have 0 and 1 1 being printed. Does that make sense to you? Yeah. Alright, so now we'll just go through a bit of theory. So you might have seen this syntax during the week 4 lectures. It is a common switch case statement. You have a switch inside which you write the expression, which is basically the conditional expression, and then you have if whatever is evaluated to be the value of this expression, say you compute this expression, whatever the value you get, if the value is x, then it will execute this code block, and then you have to break it so that it comes outside the switch case statement. Then if it does not match x, you check it against y. Sorry. Okay, the flowchart is not visible. Probably, basically, it tells the same thing. You can see it later on in the PDF. When I share the PDF, you can see it there. Okay, so for now, just the syntax I think is good enough. So what I was saying is, if the expression evaluates to the value of y, then this corresponding code block will be executed. And you need to end each of the cases with a break unless your question demands you not to, and then you have a default one. If the expression does not evaluate to x or y, then the default one will be executed. So and whatever code you have written under the default one, that will be executed. Okay, now let us see an example. So here we are using a switch to write temperature in Celsius. Okay, this is some value. So this is some variable, and it has a certain value. Now we are writing a switch case and a default statement here. So which statement is correct for the following lines?
It's B, sir. It will print both statements.
Why do you think so?
Because for the case less than 35, there is no break.
Okay, but okay, but I think it will give a compilation error. Do you think why? Could you think of a reason why? So basically, the switch case statements cannot be written like this. You cannot follow this format for a switch case statement. So the case has to be only a single value. Okay, if you want to express things like this, you have to write it like this. So case 1, case 2, case 3, all the way till case 34, because less than 35, you want to express less than 35, right? So you have to express like this, 1 up to 34, and then you do this printf thing, printf hot day, right? This is illegal syntax. Like, you cannot express case less than 35. You have to write all the way from whatever is your starting point, like whatever value this temperature in Celsius could take, all the way till 34 here, and then you could have, like, you could miss you can see I have not written the break statement here, right? So if any of these cases is true, like 1 2 3 4 all the way till 34, if any of these cases is true, it will go and print hot day. Did you get what I'm trying to say?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah. So what you said is true, because there is if you remove the break statement, then it will cause a fall through. We call it a fall through. Basically it will go and execute the next case as well if you don't use a break. But here like I said, depending on the question, we will use break. So here I want all the way from 1 to 34, whatever temperature in Celsius value I get, I want that it should print hot day. So I'll not use break in this case, so that for any of these values from 1 all the way till 34, there should be a fall through and it should print hot day. And if it is a value other than 1 to 34, then it will print the default, which is not that hot day. So after this print, I should give a break, and then I should put the default case. Okay, then it will, otherwise what you are saying would be true, which would be, like, if I don't use the break here and I simply write default, then it will print both of this. Even if the value is, say, 14 or something, say the value is 14, so case 14 will come somewhere here, it will fall all the way through, it will print hot day. Then again, if the break is not present, it will go and print the default as well, which is not that hot day. So both the statements will be printed. But this, as it is, it's like it will give a compilation error. I hope that's clear.
Yes, sir, it's clear.
Okay, so now we'll just look at one more example of the switch case statements. So here you have defined a floating point variable which is 5.6 with the value of 5.6. The variable name is num, and then you are using a switch case statement to print certain things. And yeah, there is no break, so if it prints, then it will fall through, it will cause a fall through. So what do you think should be the output of the given program? Right. So this will give a compilation error again because switch case cannot be used with floating point. Floating point data. So switch case cannot be used with floating point data. It can be used only with integers, characters. That's all. Characters only because it can be converted to their respective ASCII code. Only that is why it can be used with characters and integers. Okay. So that is all you can use switch case with. You cannot use it with floating point data. So that is one drawback of switch case compared to the if else statement. Okay, it cannot use floating point. You cannot use floating point data with switch case. So in this case, it will just give you a compilation error. Okay. All right. So now we reach the looping statements. So now we look at the three different loops. I'll just again, probably you might not be able to see the flow chart, but when I share the PDF, you can have a look at it. So I'll just explain the examples. So here for all three loops, I think I will be printing all the even integers from 0 to 10. So the loop goes like this. I write for, I have an iterator which is I. This is an iterator. It goes from 0. So first part of the for loop is the initialization part. So I initialize I to 0. Then the second part is the condition part. And the third part is the increment part. Increment or decrement, whatever you want to do, depending on your question. So here I initialize the iterator I which is an integer, to 0. That is where I start. Now for the first loop, so first time it will loop, so I equals 0. Okay, it will go and it will print I, so it prints 0 and then a line space. Okay, then at the end of the loop what happens? Okay, so sorry, before that, when it starts the loop, it will initialize I to 0 and it will check if I is less than equal to 10, which is true. I is less than equal to 10 because I is 0. So the condition checking occurs at the beginning. Now once that this is true, this whatever is inside the for loop will be executed. So it will print I, that is the value of 0. Now at the end of the for loop, the increment step will happen, which is I plus equals 2. That means I equal to I plus 2, means I's value will become 2, and then we will go on to the second loop. So in the beginning of the second loop, it will check if I less than equal to 10. The conditional will be checked again. So this is still true. So it will go and it will print the value of I, which is 2, and it will then at the end of the for statement block, it will again increment the value according to whatever increment condition you have given, which is here it is I plus equals 2, so I will become 4. Now it will go to the third loop. It will again check if I less than equal to 10, which is true. Then it will print the value of I, which is 4, and I's value will be incremented by 2. It will become 6. Now similarly, fourth loop, I less than equal to 10, which is true. It will print the value of 6. I will be incremented by 2. It will become 8. Then it will go to the fifth loop. In the fifth loop, it will again check if I less than equals 10, which is true. Then it will print I, which is 8 now. Then it will increment the value of 8 and it will become 10. Right? Now in the sixth loop, what happens in the sixth loop? So it will again check if I less than equals to 10. It is true. So it will print 10 and the I value will be incremented by 2 and it will become 12. Now what happens next? It will again check I less than equal to 10. But here it finds that it is false, because I has become 12 now, so it will be false. So once that is false, it will exit the for statement and it will go to the next statement here. The next statement is return. So until this condition is satisfied at the beginning of the loop keeps on iterating. Okay, so that is how the looping statement works, the for loop statement. So now we look at the while loop. So in the while loop, it basically follows the same kind of the same manner of writing, just that we initialize it before. So in the while loop, we just mention the conditional. Okay, so we just mention the condition, we initialize it beforehand, and we do the increment explicitly inside the loop. So you can see that I have initialized it separately. I just write the conditional here and I initialize it, I increment it within the loop block. Okay, so it will act in exactly the same fashion. So this actually, why this while and for has been separated out from each other is because there is something called a counter controlled looping statement and a sentinel controlled looping statement. Probably it has been covered in the class already. So counter controlled means you know how many conditions, how many times it will loop or something like that, and sentinel control means it will loop until a certain condition has been achieved or a certain condition has become false. So while loop is mostly used in the sentinel controlled approach, while for loop is mostly used in the counter controlled approach. But it's not necessary that it will be used only in that way. It can be used with the for loop, and the while loop can be used with either of these approaches. Okay. Now the third kind is the do while loop. So here the only difference is that the condition checking happens at the end of the loop. So that is very crucial though. The condition checking happens at end of the loop. So why that is crucial is because that means that the loop will execute at least once even if the conditional is false. So what happens here, I initialize I to 0. Okay, now I go to the do statement, I print something. Now it does is it whatever I wanted to do, it already does this inside the do loop without even checking the conditional. So far I have not checked the conditional. Now after the loop is done, I check the conditional and I found out that the conditional might be false. Okay, so even if the conditional is false, I have still the loop has executed one time already. So that is the difference of do while loop. It will execute at least once, and the condition checking happens at the end of the loop. That is why the loop will at least execute once. So in this case, in the example that I have given, it will execute more than once. But if suppose this had been I less than 2, okay, in this conditional, and here I started with I equals 0, I printed I, you would have a value of 0, and then I became 2 because it got incremented by 2, it became 2. Now I check the conditional, I find out that my conditional was that if I less than 2. So in that case this is false, so the loop will just exit here. So because I'm checking the condition at the end of the loop will still execute once even if my conditional is false. So that is the specialty of the do while loop compared to the other two loops. Okay, now that's just the theory part. So now I'll just go through another question related to looping statements. So here you have I less than I equals 0 and j equals 0, which are two integer variables, and you are doing a while loop separated by comma. So this comma is an interesting thing because you might have seen a question like this in the previous assignment. So int I equals 1 comma 2 comma 3. So what will happen in this case? Okay, so this comma operator is basically a operator which will evaluate this. So it has a left to right as so it has a left to right associativity. So the operation will occur left to right, and what will happen is comma is it's the lowest precedence operator. So what happens here is it will evaluate the first part and it will reject it, it will discard the value, it will go to the second part, it will evaluate it, it will discard the value, it will go to the third part, it will evaluate it, it will discard it until so basically it will take the last value. So here if you write this is basically the same as saying that I equals 3, because what it does is it takes I equals 1, discards it, takes I equals 2, discards it, then takes I equals 3. So finally it will take the value of I equals 3. So that is what the comma operator does. Okay, so a similar concept will be applied here as well when you are writing two different conditionals within a while with a while statement. So you are writing I equals 0 and j equals 0, and you have a conditional here. You are incrementing the value of I and j within the loop, and after the loop is over you are printing I and j, the value of I and j. So what do you think should be the printed value of, so not I but what will be the printed value from the C program below? So anyone wants to take a try at this? Option what? Okay,
Option D.
Option D. Okay, that's, let's see, why do you think that is option D? All right, so anyway, let's see what will.
Sir, it's B, 4, 4.
Okay, okay, let's see what will happen. Okay, so let me write all the loops, what happens. So first loop, in the first loop what happens, it checks the conditional I less than 4, which is not required. So this turns out to be true, but then it is rejected, it's useless to us. So it checks j less than 5, which is also true. So this is the one which is true. So then the loop starts. So I plus plus and j plus plus. So by the end, by the time this loop ends, your I value becomes 1 and j value becomes 1, right? So we go to the second loop now. So in the second loop what happens, you again check I less than 4. It is still true, but it doesn't matter to us because the comma operator just rejects whatever we get. Then we go to j less than 5. This is true, so we go and run the second loop. So I value becomes 2, j value becomes 2. Now the third loop we again check I less than 4. This is true, but it doesn't matter. We check the next one, j less than 5, which is true. This is what that matters. So the I value and the j value incremented by 1 becomes 3. Now fourth loop, I less than 4, which is still true but doesn't matter. J less than 5, true, which matters. I becomes 4 and j becomes 4. Fifth loop, I less than 4, it is false, but like I said, it doesn't matter because it's the comma operator. It evaluates the first part, rejects the value, go to the second part. The second part is j less than 5. This is true and this is what matters because this is the last one, right? So now you will have I, so I and j will be incremented again. I will become 5, j will become 5. Sixth loop, what will happen here, it will check I less than 4, which is false, but it doesn't care, it will reject the value. Then j less than 5, which is also false. Now this is what matters, j is less than 5 is false. So now it will exit loop here. So when you print I and j, you will print 5 and 5, not 4 and 4. Is this clear?
Yes, sir, yes.
Right. Okay, so if that is clear, there are no questions here, then we can just go and look at one, you know, simple code to print the Fibonacci sequence. So the Fibonacci sequence, as you can see, we start off with 0 and 1, then we add up both the numbers to get the next one, then we add up 1 and 1 to get 2, 1 and 2 to get 3, 2 and 3 to get 5, 3 and 5 to get 8, and so on. So what I will do for this, let's say I will take A to be 0 and B to be 1, and then I'll take a C, which can be whatever, our next term. Now I'll have an iterator which will start from 0. Now okay, so now what we will do is, the first two terms are 0 and 1, so we can directly print them out. So I'll say printf %d comma %d a and b, right? That is 0 and 1. Now I start the loop. So I'll say loop, so we are already starting from, okay, let's start with 0, but it does not matter, like I'll go till n minus 2 because I have already printed two values, so I'll just go till n minus 2. So I up to n minus 2, I from 0 up to n minus 2. So what I will do inside this, so my next element will be the addition of the first two elements. So C equals A plus B simply. Okay, that is my next element, and I will print this element. So I'll do a printf percentage d. So here I should put another comma. So percentage d comma C. Okay, so I printed C. Now what I have to do, I have to exchange the values. So initially A and B was this, I have C as this. Now I have to bring A to this value and B to this value, so that I can get 2 as the next value, right? So what I will do is I have to switch the values of B to C. So I'll write B equals C. Should I write that first? And A equals B? That would be wrong, right? So how would you swap this to numbers? So how would you swap these numbers?
So it's A equal to B and B equal to C.
Right. So this would be the order in which we should do it. So A equals B. So that means A will take the value of B, and then B will take the value of C, and that will be our for loop. So let us see what this prints. So first it will print 0 and 1, and then it starts the loop. It starts from I equals 0, the first loop. The first loop, what it prints is C, which is 0 plus 1. So you have 2 being printed. Sorry, 0 plus 1, which will print 1, not 2. It will print 0 plus 1, which is 1. Then the value of A will become 1, and value of B will be 1. So in the next loop you will have 1 plus 1, which will become 2. C will become 2. You will print C. 2 will be printed. Now A value will become 1. B value will become 2. So in the next loop, what will happen? A plus B. So the value of C will be 3, and you will print C, and A value will become 2, and B value will become 3. And then in the next loop you will have 2 plus 3, which is 5, and so on. So you will be printing the Fibonacci sequence. Okay, is this clear? How we are in a sorry, it's clear, right?
Yes.
Okay, so basically what we want to print here is the Fibonacci sequence. The Fibonacci sequence starts from with 0 and 1, and then we keep on adding the numbers. So you can see 0 plus 1 will give you the next one, which is 1. 1 plus 1 will give you 2, which is the next value. 1 plus 2, and so on. So here we just print 0 and 1, which are the first two values. Then we go up till we have already printed. We have to print till n terms. We have already printed 2 terms, so we go from 0 to n minus 2. Okay, or you could go from I equals 2 to n, whichever your choice. Now what I want to do is I want to find out the sum of this 2, which will be my next term, right? So C equals A plus B. A and B were 0 and 1 initially, so that will be my next term. C will be my next term. I'll print C, and then I'll just switch this A value to the value of B and B value to the value of C, so that for the next loop I will again add them up and I'll get the next term. So in the first time I'll run the loop, I will print a C value of 1, and A will become 1, B will become 1. In the second loop I will have C become 2 because A plus B. Now A will become 1 and B will become 2. Now in the third loop you will have C becoming 3, A becoming 2, and B becoming 3. In the fourth loop you will have C becoming 5, which is A plus B, A becoming 3, and B becoming 5, and so on. So is it more clearer now? Like we are changing the values of a and b so that in the next loop we can just add up and we'll get the next term. Right. Does anyone else have any questions? Yeah, n is a input from the from the user. You can say you can take it as 10 or whatever, but like you can ask the user for the input as well. Like it's up to you. Right. Anything else? So in the previous class, someone asked me regarding this question, which is what happens if I equals I plus plus? What if I write I equals I plus plus? Like say int I is 8 and I write that I equals I plus plus and I try to print I, then what happens? Right, the value will be 8. Why? Is because so this plus plus basically what it does is it increments the value. So how this calculation happens is, so when you write plus plus, it will take the value of I, right? So it will do this operation, I equals I, which is I equals 8. It will save it. But okay, no, let me say it in a bit more better to understand manner. So if I what happens here in the I equals I plus plus statement, so this is a postfix increment operation. So it will first do the operation and then try to increment, right? But the assignment operation occurs, as you know, the assignment operation has lower precedence than the postfix increment. So what will happen here is it will save the value. What is the operation that you are doing here is you are saving the value of I into the I itself. So the increment operation basically, even if it happens, it will not reflect, because what you are doing is you are saving the value of the preserved value. So how this postfix increment occurs is so the system reads this. So I equals 8. This is the preserved value. Okay, this is the preserved value of I, and it will do the increment in the background, but it will return to you the preserved value itself. Okay, so this will return to you the preserved value itself, and you are setting that to I. So you are performing this operation which is I equals 8. So it doesn't matter that you are doing an increment. Finally, the assignment operation that you are doing is with the preserved value, which is 8. So this will give you 8 as the answer, not 9. So it is kind of, that is why this postfix and prefix operations are like professionally they are not very they are not very preferred to be used, because they have this kind of like limits and checks on them. You don't, sometimes they can lead to ambiguous behavior. You don't know what the answer will be. For example, if you write something like this, I plus 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 I, so this is a multiplication and you are saving it in I. So what does this give you? This is a very ambiguous statement. Okay, it will be compiler dependent. The answer here will be compiler dependent. You don't know which will be executed first. So the postfix and the prefix increment operations and decrement operations, ideally I would personally suggest not to use. If you can get if you are writing code, I would personally say not to use in such ambiguous scenarios. Like you can use it in a for loop or something, that is fine, but wherever else you want to use it, better to write I equals I plus 1 rather than doing a postfix or prefix operation. Alright, so this is another way to do this without using a third variable. You can see that I have used only x.
I have a question.
Yes.
If there is so much ambiguity when using this operation, so why are those getting used?
Why do we use it is because yeah, I'm not sure why we can use it. It's like these are functionalities which have been already defined in C, but in C and C++ since the very beginning, but these have their own limitations. So this have been built for very using it in very simple settings, right? Like this in the for loop, or in very simple expressions. So but when you try to write complex expressions while using this postfix and prefix increment operations or decrement operations, you do not know exactly what it will happen, and as a programmer you want to be sure of what, no matter what the compiler, you should be sure of what that statement will do. So whenever you are writing a code, you should be sure of what that particular statement that you have written should do. It should not be compiler dependent. But when you write this complex statements using this prefix and postfix operations, it tends to become compiler dependent. For example, in this case, like I said, it will become compiler dependent. We don't want that to happen. So these functionalities have been defined in the programming language for simple expressions, like in the for loop, or in the previous question that I showed, we just did an increment, nothing else. So simple expressions. So not when we go into more and more complicated expressions. Okay, so that is why they have been defined. So we are just in a way we are kind of misusing them into when we are using them into complex expressions. Yeah. So I hope that answers your question more or less.
Yeah, Thank you.
So are there any other questions? Okay, so yeah, so what I was saying earlier is, yeah, the last slide you can in the last slide you can find a different approach to write the same code of Fibonacci, printing the Fibonacci sequence. So you can see I have only used two variables here, x and y, which is set to 0 and 1 respectively, and you can see how I have done that. So just have a look, try to compute it by yourself, write a few loops, like for I equals 3, 4, 5 and so on, write a few loops and you will understand what exactly happens here. So you can do this Fibonacci sequence calculation without even using a third variable, right? So yeah, just try it out. If anyone else has any questions, I can answer them right now. Okay, yeah, I can surely do that. But anyway, I'll be uploading this PDF onto the SWAYAM portal page, so you can probably access it from there. Yes. Any more questions? Sorry, I didn't get you actually. Could you just repeat that? Sorry, your voice is a bit low. Can you just write it in the chat? I could hear that you are saying something about any more questions to discuss. I don't have any more questions. So this is basically the last slide I have. I was just asking if anyone had any queries that they wanted to be answered.
Sir, can you show the switch statement, sir?
The switch statement? Okay. This? So do you have?
Sir, why
Yeah.
it show the compiler error, sir? It's
Yes, it showed a compiler error because you are not allowed to write a switch less than 35. It, like, you can write only a single value in a case statement. You can write only a single value. You could have written just case 35. Okay, so if you want to have this effect, which is where you will have all the way from 1 to 34, you will print, say, hot day. So in that case you would have to write case 1 colon, then case 2, case 3, case 4, all the way till case 34, and then write a printf hot day. Only then you would be able to have, so whatever be the value of this temperature in Celsius, this variable, if it is within 1 and 34, it will print hot day. If that was your that is what you wanted to do, then you would have to write it in that manner. So this is illegal syntax. This less than symbol is an illegal syntax for the case statement. That is why it will give a compilation error.
Sir, can you show next slide?
Yeah.
Sir, in there it shows compiler. Why, sir, it shows compiler error?
This shows a compiler error because switch case cannot be used with floating point data, which is like float, double, and all those things. You can only use it with integers and with characters. And characters, you can use it only because they will be considered by their corresponding ASCII code values. Only because of that reason you can use them, use the characters in switch case. Otherwise you can only use integers. So here I have tried to use floating point in the switch statement in the expression. Here num is actually 5.6, which is a floating point data. That is why it will give you a compiler error.
Sir, it is also there in the print statement in there. After the switch statement, why it will not write on the print statement?
Sorry, which
In the switch statement, sir, it has a print statement is also there.
yeah. Which print statement you're talking about? This print statement?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah. So if you had written, if this was correct, if you just ignore this switch case part, then it will print just I think 5 or something. So this syntax is not wrong. You are basically trying to force the floating point to be printed as an integer, which is fine. Like it, there you will lose some data, but it will print something. So it is not illegal from the syntax perspective. But using a floating point data with the switch case, that is illegal. That is not allowed. So that is why you are getting the compiler error here, not because of the print statement. And if there is a compiler error, then it will not give any output, let alone any print, nothing. It will just show compiler error. It will not give, and it will not execute itself. Okay.
Yes, sir. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So okay, when does a runtime error occur? Okay, so runtime error occurs, of course, during the runtime. Yeah, but yeah, so far we have not encountered a runtime error, right? So basically a few examples would be when you are accessing. So once we go into a bit more advanced topics like arrays, you'll see that if you try to access a memory location which is not available to you, it will give you kind of a segmentation fault, which is a runtime error. Like you will be accessing locations which have not been allocated to your code. In that case it will give you runtime errors. Okay. And then there are concepts of dynamic memory, which we'll be covering in week 12, I think, where we do all the operations of allocating data in during runtime rather than compile time. So all this, in so far whatever we have seen, all the data, all the variables get allocated to their spaces, to their memory locations in while compilation occurs. But in dynamic memory allocation, as we will see in week 12, it will happen in runtime, and then it increases the scope of having runtime errors by a lot. So yeah, that probably that should answer your question.
sir.
Yes.
I have missed your last week's session, sir. Shall I get the link?
Yeah, I think you can get the link in if you open the SWAYAM page for this course. Towards the end of the list, like you have a list of where you have written week 1, week 2, week 3. So you'll get a problem solving session, a link to the problem solving session there. So you just click on that, you will get a Google spreadsheet. Now open the spreadsheet and you can find the links of the sessions, of the tutorial sessions, the previous ones. You can find the links there. Okay.
Okay, I will call it.
Yeah. Okay. So if there are no further questions, so I'll close the session here. Thank you everyone for joining. We'll meet again next week at the same time on Tuesday 6 to 8 p.m. where we'll discuss week 5, some questions related to week 5 lectures. Yeah, and thank you for joining.